Uh, Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome everybody to the show. And I want you to picture, if you will, you're the sideline reporter for the Seattle Seahawks, full of 60,000 screaming people every week. You get to meet people like Pete Carroll and so many others. You are a broadcaster, you are a producer, you're a speaker, you're a author, and you're also a glass ceiling breaker because you are a woman in the world of sports. Is that you? It could be you, but I know who it is right now, and her name is Jen Mueller, and she joins us live just before she has to leave to go to Seahawks training camp because she does the reporting for them as well, and she's a sideline reporter for them. It's amazing that all the things that you do. Jen, welcome to the show. I'm so proud and so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
It's going to be great because I got to ask you, you grew up in the Midwest, right?
I grew up in Texas. Yep, Houston mostly. But yes, I've lived in the Northwest 25 years now, which is kind of hard to believe.
You must have moved here when you were 10.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. Yeah, let's go with that. Mm-hmm.
And the things that you have done, now I've been in town for 60 years. So I remember the Sonics when they were here. They're now in Oklahoma. And I remember my dad worked for the Nordstrom family when they bought the Seahawks and brought them here. So I got to see the first preseason game and also the Mariners and stuff. And I've been a sports fan my entire life here, and I used to wait for the news. See, at one time, ladies and gentlemen, there were people who actually delivered the newspaper to your house. They don't do that anymore, but they did at that time, and I would wait because I wanted to get the sports page about the Sonics, about Spencer Haywood and Freddie Brown and all of those guys. So I've been a sports guy my whole life, and one of the people that is really, really talented at what she does is she's a great interviewer. She interviews, I don't know, 100 people a month. Isn't that what I heard?
Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's thousands at this point over the course of my career. But yes, it's a lot of talking, which, it should be somewhat expected since I got talks too much on every single report card in school. So this should not be a surprise to people who have known me for years.
Yeah, but you're also a communications major. And one of the things that you talk about a great deal is the value of being able to communicate succinctly and properly and to create a first impression. Because when you're interviewing all of these athletes, you've got a minute maybe to establish a rapport and an idea of who you are and what you're going to be asking them. And because a lot of these guys, they're huge people, but they're young kids.
Well, and the environment that I'm working in is not set up for traditional networking and relationship building. I mean, I see these guys all the time, but most of the time it's in passing. They're going onto the field, they're coming off the field. There is an hour or 45 minutes or so where a locker room or a clubhouse is open to the media. And at that point, I can make my rounds. But all of your relationship building, or the great majority of it, takes place in a really big open space. And it's not like you get their undivided attention for 45 minutes. You're walking around and it's saying hello, and it's finding these little ways to connect and make an impact which is part of what we do in TV and radio. I tell people that conversations can be measured in seconds, not minutes. And I tell people that for two reasons. One, we do it all the time in TV. If you were to ever see a TV rundown, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got the topic that we're going to talk about, the person who's doing the talking, and off to the side, it'll have 15 or 20 or 30. If you're really lucky, it says 130. And that's how many seconds you get to land your message. So 15 seconds is something that they expect me to be able to do. If you flip that around into the interactions that we're having, I know that it doesn't seem like much, but I work really hard to maximize the one word that I get with players or the 15 seconds that I get, because it's the consistency of those interactions that ultimately gets to the relationships I need, which is to get them to talk to me whether they really feel like it or not, regardless of the outcome of the game.
Now, do you feel like because you are an attractive woman that they're going to talk to you more so than they are to other broadcasters that maybe have a microphone in their face?
I don't know that it has anything to do with looks or gender. I do think that it has to do with the intent of the conversation. Very early on, I was standoffish because that's what I was told to do. I was told to walk into a locker room and to make sure that nobody knew I was there and to make sure that nobody knew that I was a woman who was there. It was kind of the same feeling when I was a football official. Everything is going to be a lot easier if nobody really figures out that you're a woman. We'll deal with it if they figure out that you've got a ponytail, but just try to kind of fly under the radar. And then I realized that one of my superpowers is truly just caring about people and wanting to give them a chance to tell their story. That's how I look at all of these interviews and all these interactions. We can debate, whether I saw the story the same way you saw the story, but I'm not going to debate that that is your story to tell. And I think what sets me apart is, number one, I do work for the teams that I report for. So it does change the messaging in the relationship. But number two, I really do care about them. And I'm not trying to be combative in an interview. I really am just trying to ask the question that gets the answer that I know that they can give. So they're confident in giving me an answer. That's kind of the first part. Whether it's good or bad, they know that they are giving the right answer, because there's a lot of times that we create confusion. And if there's confusion, we just give a safe answer. They're giving the right answer. And I'm setting it up in a way where you get to tell me you're part of the story.
That is exciting. Now, I have to say this because there are people that have not ever been around pro football players. When I was a bartender years ago, the Steelers when they played the Seahawks, they stayed in the hotel. And these human beings are, because there's a draft, and so these are the biggest, most talented, fastest human beings on the planet. And some of them are 6'5", 6'6". They're huge human beings. Is that ever intimidating when you're talking to a guy that's 6'7" and weighs 330 pounds and they just lost the game?
You know what's funny about that? So not necessarily after the game, but the way that locker rooms, the Seahawks NFL locker room was set up before the pandemic was by position groups. Okay. So you'd group the wide receivers together. The quarterbacks would be together. It's this huge open space, right? A locker room is a huge open space, and you've essentially got stalls, right? With a place to sit and a place to put your stuff in. Okay. And at opposite corners of the room were the offensive linemen and then the defensive linemen. And those used to be the two most intimidating corners of the room, but not necessarily for the reasons you would think. Yes, size plays a role. I am 5'4". I usually wear heels or some sort of platform tennis shoe so that I can get like another inch or two because I'm just short. But quite honestly, it was the personality types. In general, offensive linemen tend to be very introverted, very keep to themselves. The energy in that corner of the room is very specific to them. The energy in the corner of the room that had the defensive linemen, yes, they are big, strong, fast, and powerful, but they tend to be very outgoing, very just like loud, and they're always engaged with each other in these just these back and forths, right? The number of inside jokes, and they're really loud and rambunctious. And so to break into that energy was just as challenging to break into the energy of the introverts, because I naturally fall someplace in the middle. And that's the other thing I don't think people realize about a locker room or a clubhouse. These guys are human, and it's the exact same personality types that you run into at work. There's introverts, there's extroverts, there's people who are really good at answering questions, there's people that would rather you never call on them to speak in front of the room. And so it's trying to navigate that. But when you put them in position groups, that felt a little intimidating. So you just kind of have to approach it one at a time. Yeah.
Well, when I was playing football in high school, and before the game, we would be very focused, and I didn't want to have a conversation with anybody because I was trying to be angry and ready to go and really ready to attack, because I played defense. And do you find that the guys are less likely to talk to you when they're prior to the game and they're getting ready and there's a lot going on in their head?
Well, so before an NFL game, the locker room is closed. I will talk to them afterwards. Now, they do have a couple of different times where they're going to run onto the field and they're going to warm up and they're going to go through their own individual drills. They're probably going to go back in. They're going to come back out with the team. There are guys who will stop and chat, 3.5, 4 hours before the game when they're just doing their own kind of light jogging and light work. But you can tell that they're dialed in. I mean, look, an NFL game is an opportunity that you don't get very many of during the course of the year. And so to really be in that space mentally, to go through all of kind of your checklist of things to make sure that you're dialed in. I don't generally try to talk to guys on the field before the game. Every once in a while, I need a clarification on something, but yeah, they tend to get pretty dialed in on game day. And after the game, I don't know if people realize this either, but it's mandated that the locker room opens a certain amount of time after the game. Guys have to be available. Now, they don't have to talk to you, and not everybody has to be at their locker. One of the things I say in presentations is it's only about 10 or 15 minutes. And it doesn't matter what the outcome of the game is. That is a lot of emotion. I mean, you know this. When you play in a football game, you are building up, and you are like just peak performer, high intensity. Sometimes those interviews sound differently than you think they should because they're still getting over the emotion like 15 minutes after the game. It can be very intense on game days.
It is amazing to me how professionally that you handle your interactions with all of these guys. Your questions are succinct and they're pointed. And if they don't want to talk to you, obviously those aren't going to get aired. Or if they swear or stuff, or if they're angry, which some of the guys, it's hard to get that degree of excitement for a game. And then 15 minutes later, it's like, okay, it's all done. We don't need to worry about it. And that doesn't happen very much.
Yeah. So the presentation that I give, that I've given most often in the last year, now people are going to cringe at this title, but just stick with me on this. The talk is called I Talk to Losers. And it is a conversation about accountability, feedback, and having tough conversations. And the point being, the expectation does not change based on the outcome of the game. Meaning, when I go into a clubhouse or locker room, specifically a Seahawks locker room, the expectation is always that I'm going to get 4 to 6 interviews. Okay. That is a lot and potentially daunting after a loss. And what that conversation is, every post-game interview is a performance review and a post-mortem that is taking place minutes after that game ends. When you know that that's what's happening in the conversation, and when you realize what's on the line, if you dropped the kickoff, this happened a couple of times last year, right? You botch the kickoff, you fumble it, you muff it, there's a big mistake. You have to talk to that guy about the mistake that was made. Number one, he's expecting it because that's also the expectation in sports. But number two, you have to recognize what this might mean for him and to meet them where they are. Sometimes those interviews are going to sound really short or terse. Sometimes they are going to sound angry. That's not at me. I always give them the option. Will you talk to me or not? If they say no, I say, okay, I will come back to you next week. Thank you so much. But if they're going to agree to talk to me, they might have just cost themselves an opportunity next week. They might be getting demoted. They might be getting cut. That might have been their last chance in the NFL. And so truly just understanding that there's a human being standing in front of you. And I don't know what it feels like to muff a punt or a kickoff. I know what it feels like to screw up big time and to feel all those emotions about letting teammates down or knowing that I could have done better or having practice to do something better and different. So I think it's just showing up as a human being that makes a big difference.
And as a matter of fact, the guy who muffed the kickoffs was no longer on the team by the next week.
That is exactly right. Yep.
And so that becomes, it's a career ending or a career altering thing. And these guys make really good money when they're playing, but when they're not, they don't anymore. So, it's really fascinating. But I want to focus on you because you've been doing this for a long time. Oh, and before we began, I did talk about Beastquake, which was, and you were on the sidelines, which Beastquake, and the reason they call it Beastquake, for those that are not familiar, was Marshawn Lynch ran for a touchdown during a playoff game, and the seismograph at the University of Washington registered the sound that came from the stadium. What was it like to be on the sidelines? That must have been crazy.
It is so loud you cannot hear yourself think, and you can feel the crowd, like in your chest. You can feel the noise and the energy, and when the crowd starts jumping up and down. Quite honestly, so I'm standing on the sidelines. I'm 5'4". I'm blocked out by just about everybody. I'm kind of behind the play because that was a 67-yard run. So At that point, you're not expecting him to break into the end zone. So I'm not really looking for that. And by the time the ball starts moving down the field, I have to look up on the video board to see the replay to understand just how cool that run was. Now, you get done and it's a huge storyline because Seattle wasn't supposed to win that game. It was an early game. I go out to dinner that night and I'm sitting at the bar and the play keeps showing over and over again. And the bartender keeps coming up and talking to my ex. My ex turned off the game because he thought it was over. Like, just kind of knowing the score in the situation. He didn't see the play. Meanwhile, I keep trying to jump in. And I never say that I was on the field, but I just keep trying to engage him in the conversation about, man, wasn't that a great run? And oh my gosh, bartender completely ignored me all night long. It is the only time that I left a not very nice tip for not engaging with me and assuming that I was the one that did not watch the game. So that one I was a little bit miffed over, but it was incredible. It was an incredible run. Marshawn is an incredible human being.
Yeah, he really is. And that was great. I want to give you a different perspective on one of the games because during a playoff game, the Green Bay Packers and the Seahawks were playing. There were 10 minutes left, and the Seahawks came down and scored, and then they did a onside kick and recovered the onside kick. But I was driving a bus in the tunnel in downtown Seattle. And because they had not played very well up to that point, there were people that had left the game and were now getting on the bus. But you could hear the stadium because it's not very far away from the tunnel, and you could hear the stadium going crazy. And these people were like, we left early and look and see what happened. And they didn't get the opportunity to see it, which was one of the greatest comebacks in Seahawks history. Okay, enough of that. I could talk about that all day long with you, but I want to talk to you more so about what you're doing now and the speaking that you're doing and the books that you're writing and the producing that you're doing, because that's going to be a career that's going to take you a long way for a very long time, isn't it?
Well, I hope so. That's kind of the plan. But yes, I started my company, Talk Sporty, to me in 2009 with the idea that I would be able to deliver some of the strategies and skills that I was forced to develop on my own in locker rooms and during these interviews to business professionals. I mean, everybody needs to communicate effectively. When you're in TV and radio, there's a different level of accountability and immediacy, meaning people will tell you if you do a bad job. And by people, I don't just mean the producers in your ear. I mean, you are going to hear about it on social media. You are going to hear about it from fans. And so to make things easier for folks in business to know what it sounds like to communicate concisely or effectively, or here's kind of the tips and the tricks on how you get these conversations going, I have the business so that I can go out and do keynote speaking and kind of shed a different light on effective communication and, quite honestly, what sports talk can do for you at work. It's not just about the outcomes of games. You can use sports talk to further your personal brand, to make connections. And I just want people to see the parallels a little bit differently, not the metaphors, not the analogies, not the, we're going to hit a home run with this, but truly, if you want some examples of what success looks like, let's look at sports and then let's see how we can apply this to business so that we've just got another tool and something else that we can lean on when we are trying to make our point, get buy-in, and get our team succeeding at a high level.
Especially if you're a sales guy.
Especially if you're a sales guy.
You got like a minute to 2 minutes, like you say in your talks, to make an impression. And you're going to make an impression. It's either going to be positive or it's not going to be positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to make the most of that time. Sometimes we let conversations happen to us, even when you are in a position of sales and your ultimate outcome is you want to get the deal, whatever that deal is, right? You want to sell. That's fine to have that as an objective, but we don't have enough small wins built in along the way to know that we're doing it right. So, for example, when I give keynotes and I talk about the smallest measure of success, it is the word hello. It is always how I measure success in a locker room or clubhouse, which sounds like a really low bar. You don't say hello to everybody that you pass. You don't wave hi to everybody on the street who waved hi to you. Sometimes you intentionally ignore people by putting your headphones on and dialing into work so that you don't have to say hi. If you think about all the different ways and reasons that you wouldn't, now we can start to see that as a success. So if I'm looking at really small measures of success, I can be very clear on what I'm trying to accomplish in 15 seconds. And it's not a sale. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to establish rapport and connection. Eventually, It's going to be a sale, but I need to get like an interaction going with you before that ever happens. So once you dial it down to be the lowest measure of success, now you're going to have more success because you're looking for ways to stack wins, which is exactly how athletes talk about practice.
It's amazing to me because, in nowadays with social media and all the things that are out there are people that don't value the establishment of relationship the way they used to.
Well, and I think they don't know how to build the relationships. I mean, that's not a class that they teach you in school, right? They teach you all the technical stuff. It doesn't matter if you're in sales or business or broadcasting. They didn't teach us how to build relationships with athletes in sports broadcasting classes. That's not what they did. It's just assumed that you are going to go out there and do that. And I think what happens is we fall into listening to conventional wisdom and folks with well-meaning advice, but we never actually test those theories, right? So you would say things like, we'll just ask people about themselves. They'll just tell you about themselves. No, they won't. Not the people that I work with. Ken Griffey Jr. will not talk about himself. It's like pulling teeth, right? So you better have a different strategy for building relationships with people who have influence and are key decision makers, because they may or may not want to talk about themselves. We think that open-ended questions are the best questions to ask. I can promise you they lead to a lot of confusion and you're not going to get a real answer. I can see it on TV. When you've done thousands of interviews, you can see the deer in the headlights look and people go, oh God, what's the right answer? I don't know. I don't know what part of the seventh inning you want me to talk about. So I'm just going to say it was great. Like, I don't, right? So there's all these different things. And we think that any sort of back and forth constitutes relationship building. That's not true either. We need to be a little bit more selective, strategic, and intentional, right? If I know that I only have a short amount of time, I need to be intentional about how I use that time.
Now, do you use they call it the elevator pitch or the 30-second pitch. Do you ever use that?
No, I use
didn't
a
think
success
so.
statement. Yep. So a success statement, and it's the thing that I've used for years, because the one interaction I know that I am guaranteed outside of hello is an introduction of some sort. And often it is the question, how are you? I mean, we're going to get that question depending on if you're working from home or if you go out to the grocery store, whatever, right? You could potentially get that question 24 times a day. Yep. And I already know what your response is, because when I do this in large audiences, they say the same 2 words. Good, fine. And then they turn it back around and they say, how are you? And you say, good, fine. And then we sit there and we wait for the conversation to start. And we hope that somebody says something interesting. I flip that script. And it's not that I never say good or fine in relation to how are you, but that's where the success statement goes, which is the answer. So you can be good or fine, but you got to go one step further and tell people why, right? It's a great day. I had a chance to hop on a podcast and I get to go to Seahawks today. I just gave you 2 things that I am interested in talking about, and I made the follow-up questions really easy and obvious. The success to me, I was on a live podcast. And quite honestly, that I'm still working for the Seahawks, right? So like, you could go either way. If I have a really big success, or if I'm talking to a manager or a client, I'm awesome. We're ahead of schedule on that project and we're right on budget. Great. Now I don't have to wait until the end of the project to tell you how awesome this is, right? I'm just giving you, now you could ask me any number of questions off of that, but I know I get a response to the question, how are you? Which, by the way, is the biggest, broadest, most open-ended question you can get. And you're never going to get a good answer because it's not a safe space.
Yeah, no,
right.
That
so
is
you got to be a little bit more specific. But if I know that I'm going to get that question, that's where I can use that to my advantage. And I'll do it in relationship building, right? If one of the athletes asks me, hey, how are you? I'm awesome. I get a chance to go to a concert on Friday night. I'm really looking forward to it. Well, now there's a human aspect between you and me, and we're not just talking about football, right? Or I'm excited to get back to the book that I'm reading, right? It's such a page turner. It doesn't really matter what it is. But I just made it easy for them to talk to me. They don't feel like the work is on them to build the relationship. I just teed you up, and you can run with it or not, but I know that I use that time to my advantage.
And so what they then do, as an example, pick the concert. Mm-hmm. Their natural response to that would be, oh, really? Who's playing?
Exactly right. Who's playing? Morgan Wallen's playing. Oh, I love country music, or I hate country music, or the last show that I went to, right? Now I can go in any number of directions, but we're actually into the conversation. That one sentence gives you a running start. Instead of using conversational norms and scripts, where now we come to a complete stop after, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. Now I've got a running start, and everybody can be confident and comfortable in this conversation.
And you're engaging them to engage with you, which is the entire idea behind beginning the conversation in the first place.
Yep. And when you make it easy for people to talk to you, they probably will. And to your point, that is the crux of building relationships.
And you've got a short period of time to build a relationship that works.
Yep.
And you've also you're on television a lot. And you live in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Do you like the attention that obviously you get virtually everywhere you go?
I don't know that I get that much attention. I am aware that people could recognize me. And I would much rather people come up and say hi instead of giving me weird looks at the airport. Like they think they know me, but they can't figure it out, because then I'm like, did I spill something on myself? Like what's on my face? Like, why are people looking at me like that? It truly is It truly is an honor to hear from people or to be stopped at a stadium when they say that, they watch every night with their kids, or this is like their family time when they get to go to a game. It really is an honor, because to be part of somebody's memories, however that shows up, right? Whether it was the post-game interview, or it was an in-game hit, or it was a feature story, that is a special thing that I do not take for granted.
And you're very good at what you do. How long did it take you to become good at what you do? Because there are people that go, yeah, I could do that. Well, when you were talking about the Excel spreadsheet, and you got 15 seconds, and you got 30 seconds, and you've got this short amount of time. I mean, even in the podcast world, you don't have to do that. And but for you, I mean, it's got to be succinct. It's got to be now, and you've got to eliminate things like and we and I don't and all of that stuff, and be really succinct. How long did it take you to learn that skill?
Part of that is actually taught in school. Broadcast writing is very different from any other types of writing. Fun fact, I've got a double major, double minor, and I thought English would be one of my other majors. So it's broadcasting, journalism, and public policy. Those were my double majors. And I really thought English would be something that I wanted to major in. And my guidance counselor said, I don't think you want to do that. You are going to drive yourself crazy, because those are two very different types of writing. In your English class, they're going to have you writing, 5 and 10 page papers. In your broadcasting class, they're going to have you writing 90-second scripts. You will lose your mind. So if you want to do broadcasting, you're going to need to pick something else. So part of that, you are trained to do that. And when they set a stopwatch, you don't get to go a second over. So here's the other part of this. I was a producer for 6 years, solely a producer, before I was able to be on air. And when you do a newscast and a sportscast, so the sportscast goes at the end of your newscast, right? Think about your local newscast. You had to barter for time. The news producer was in charge of everything in that half hour. And they would give you, if you were lucky, 3 minutes for all of sports. Now, going back to what you said, there was a point in time when I was the producer at King 5, we had the Sonics still in town. You had Husky basketball going. You would have Husky football going. You'd have the Seahawks going. You'd have the Mariners wrapping up. I mean, you would have 6 different sporting events, and you had to fit them in 3 minutes. If you needed more than 3 minutes, you had to go barter your time and explain why you needed more than 3 minutes. More likely, weather was going to come and take 15 seconds away from you, because weather drove ratings more than sports. So you learn that value of time very, very quickly. As unfair as it always felt working in sports, because I always thought we were the most fun, and that's what people really wanted to be watching, right? You learn the value of that along the way. When it comes to getting better at doing that, I think it is just years of wanting to excel. I work around high-performing elite athletes. I have said to people, sports broadcasting fits my skill set because I do like to talk, but the sports part of it fits my personality because I am ultra competitive. So if I'm trying to figure out how to make a greater impact or to have a more meaningful post-game interview, I just have to keep tweaking that approach. I have to get really intentional about the words that I choose. In my book, nobody should ever hit a home run. You can hit a single. I mean, technically you can hit a home run, but if I only have 15 seconds to tell the story, you better believe that Julio Rodriguez or Cal Raleigh mashed, torqued, launched, crushed, slammed, powered, blasted, anything, right? Cal Raleigh blasted one to right field. That's way different than Cal Raleigh hit a home run, right? And it's playing with how you use the power of your words. And that just takes time knowing who you are and what's authentic to you. It also takes time to sit in the space of recognizing your comfort level on both sides of the conversation. Meaning, I have a responsibility to the audience to the guys that I'm interviewing, to the front office, to the people that I work for, to all the people in sales, like the messaging around this, it's going to a lot of different audiences. And it takes just a little bit to get comfortable with who you are and how you're going to characterize things. I would say it was at least 5 years into my career, 5 or 6 years into my career before I thought, okay, I know that if I cover a winless team, which I did in Husky football, or I cover a 1-win Cougar football team, I am just as comfortable messaging after each one of those games as I am if you had just won 10 straight games. That just takes knowing who you are and understanding the landscape.
And for those of you that are interested in maybe having a broadcasting career, I want to tell you this. In this entire interview, Jen hasn't said once. That is a skill that needs to be, that they can be learned, I suppose. But did you always have that skill, or was that a learned thing where the producer said, Jen, the thing has got to go?
That has never been my crutch. Now, I do have a couple of phrases that will come out when I'm stuck and I'm just trying to get to the next thought. It is amazing what happens when you listen to yourself all the time. So when we would go and do spring training interviews, we would do about 30 interviews over the course of 10 days. Each one of those interviews, I transcribed word for word, which means I would sit and listen to these interviews. They're about 10 to 12 minutes long, and I am typing up time codes and word for word transcriptions. When you do that, you are also listening to yourself ask the questions over and over and over again. And that was with any interview. Now you can pop it into the AI service and it will do the transcribing for you. Up until the last 3 or 4 years, that was not a thing. You had to listen back to your own interviews, or when you were an intern, you were listening to other people's interviews and transcribing everything word for word. It's amazing what happens when you hear yourself and how often you cringe over what you say. It will point out all of your faults very quickly. And while wasn't one of them, there are a couple of phrases that I do need to be careful on.
I totally get it. I understand completely. And by the way, we're talking with Jen Mueller. She is a broadcaster of note in the Seattle market, and she's got a website. And I want to highlight the website, which is
TalkSportyToMe.com.
And TalkSporty How'd you come up with that name?
I was bantering around ideas, and it actually came from a friend of mine. She was a fellow producer at King 5. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she and I were working on a couple of things, and she was just really witty and funny. And I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't realize that if I was going to be doing keynote speaking, I also had to have a business name and a website and a business license and all sorts of things. And so you just kind of get thrown into this like Tumblr, and you're dealing with one thing after the other. And I'm like, I got to come up with a name. And actually it was my friend Heidi who texted me one day and said, I think this could be your name. So I will give you credit for that. Yeah.
Very good. And I've been very fortunate. I had the opportunity to interview Tony Ventrella several times. And yeah. And rest his soul. I'm sorry that he's gone. He was a great broadcaster, but more importantly than that, he was a great man.
Yes, he was. He was my seatmate on the plane the first couple of years that I was on the Seahawks charter. Yep, he was.
Yeah. And do you remember Wayne Cody?
I don't. I mean, I know of Wayne. I've heard all the stories, but I did not have the pleasure of meeting Wayne.
Yeah, he died at a young age. He was a little heavy. But those happen. And he was a sideline reporter for the Seahawks for a period of time. Yeah. So what is your favorite memory of the last 20 years? Do you have one, or there must be so many? And your conversations with Pete Carroll, I can only imagine, because he's one of my heroes.
Pete is phenomenal at messaging, and you can already see that coming through right now with Vegas and just kind of how he's answering his questions. And Pete's consistency and the way that he messages things is truly incredible, because he never once threw anybody under the bus. He had many opportunities to do so. He truly believed the best in people. And he said things so often, you're like, this is just a mantra. Like, this doesn't even mean anything. But it did mean something. And he knew that to be a great leader, you had to be consistent with the messaging. And so everybody else would get tired of hearing it. I'm sure Pete got tired of saying it, but it was kind of how you keep that culture going, whether it was, always compete or every game is a championship opportunity. There were things that I will always remember. Again, we would try to get him to say something else and go off topic. He never would. It is one of the most impressive things about Pete. That and the fact that he has just as much energy as you think 24/7. Like, he does not change. I don't think I ever saw him have a dip in energy. So that was really
and he's 72 years young at this point.
And I think he might be even older. I feel like
is he? Maybe he had
I'm not gonna age him. I'm not gonna say anything. But yes, he is really incredible on that front. I have so many great memories, and really it's always about the people. My favorite interview of all time is Felix Hernandez after his perfect game. And I talked to players after the Super Bowl win. I've covered some really impressive games, but the one with Felix was really special for me. That was a year where he and I had a little falling out in spring training. It was a communication misunderstanding that led to a period where we were a little bit chilly and frosty towards each other. And there was apologies, but I always kind of worried that something really cool was going to happen and that he was going to say, nope, I'm not going to talk to you today. That's always kind of a fear in my line of work. If the relationship gets damaged and it's my job to talk to you as a walk-off interview subject, but somewhere along the line, I do something to damage that relationship, well, I don't have as much value to my employer. And I have seen this happen with other people at other points in times. And so, Felix and I had a great relationship. It got a little bit frosty at the beginning of that year. We sat down in Detroit. I think it was in April. It was a road trip in Detroit, and we kind of hashed things out, realized, there was some miscommunication on both sides of this. Okay, we apologized. And you could just kind of see that game coming. He was so good that year. And the Mariners also had a combined no-hitter that year. So there's two things that happened during the Felix game. Number one, I'm thinking back to the combined no-hitter, which I'm going to be very honest, I did not realize until the ninth inning that it was a combined no-hitter because they used like 7 pitchers, which is really odd. So you just kind of lose track of things. As a result, all of my post-game interview questions sounded something along the lines of, oh my gosh, isn't this so cool? How cool is this? Oh my gosh, how do you react to this? Like, not exactly, but they were just like gushing. They were just stupid questions because I wasn't prepared for the interview. And I hated that interview. Really cool game. I hated those post-game interviews. So you're watching Felix and you realize what's happening. And I still have, and it's in my desk drawer, I still have the scorecard that I used that day. And I have the questions. I always start writing out questions from the first inning. But I dialed in those questions. I'm really proud of those questions. Like, I was on point because I'd learned my lesson. And when Felix came over after, he throws up his arms and he does that pose, and I was the first one to do the interview with him, and he just walks over and he looks at me and we hug. And it was just the understanding of, it's all good. It was always going to be all good. Like, let's celebrate and enjoy this moment together. So it was
human to human.
It was human to human. Yep.
And those are the best interactions that you can have.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And congratulations, number one, on your career. It's just starting. You've got a ton to do. But somebody is in our audience who understands how your post-game interviews go.
Ooh.
Because let me explain. When, as an example, my favorite player, the Big Dumper, and that's a great name, but when he hits a home run and he does a game winner, and you're the first person on the field to get to interview him, and then the Gatorade comes out. Do you pick the clothes that you're going to wear that it's okay if it gets ruined?
Well, I always know that it's a possibility. These days, it's actually water at home, so that's way easier to deal with. And in general, when Tom Murphy was here, this was the best. Tom Murphy and Teoscar Hernandez, this was the best because we had a general understanding. As long as I hang in there until the last possible second and don't give away the surprise, they will keep me out of it. And not that I care that much, but this is the moment for the players, right? I don't want to be on that highlight. I want them to be on that highlight and in that picture. That's really what I'm trying to create. I'm trying to create the moment that when they look back on their career, they will have the Gatorade dump with just them in the picture, right? So Tom was really clear on this, our former catcher. Since Tom moved on and he was with the Giants, like it's been a rotation of who's picked up the Gatorade bucket. And I don't know that the same rules still apply. I do position myself in a way where I can see the bucket while making eye contact and trying to hang in there. So it is intentional on my part. And you kind of know, right? When the rookie does something and he wins the game or it's a first walk-off, like you know what's coming. So then you try to order your questions accordingly so that when you're asking the question, it's almost like the throwaway question. I very rarely ask a throwaway, but you know that when he's going to get doused, he's not going to give you an answer. So like throw like that extra throwaway question in there as the Gatorade's coming, so that then you can just step out of the way.
It is fun to watch every time because you know it's going to happen. You just don't know when. And the players that have been around for a little while, they know it's going to happen too. Yep. And some of them are really apprehensive about it, and some of them say, "Oh well, that's just what's going to happen," and all of that. So, Jen Mueller, thank you so much for being here with me. I know you have to go off to Seahawk practice. I had to ask you too. Today's day 2 of the Seahawk practice. There can be 91 players on the field. Mm-hmm. Do you form relationships with some of the guys and then they end up getting cut?
Yeah.
Is that painful?
Yeah. You know, some of it is right now, there's so many guys, I'm not going to get a chance to meet everybody. But there are absolutely guys who were on the practice squad who then end up getting cut. Or, you know, guys, and it's hard. It used to really crush me because it felt like a total end. I've done this long enough to know that, especially with social media, I'll hear from these guys again. If they go to another team, I will probably see them again. I will still get my hug. I will still get my hello. That's a little bit easier for me to handle than early on where you're just like, oh, that's deflating or that's crushing. And it's not so much about me and the effort in building a relationship. It's the human side and the pain of, you don't want to see anybody not get that chance. But yeah, it'll happen. But it is also cool when years later, I get a chance to catch up with them or I see what they're doing after sports. And then we get a chance to connect and talk about life away from the field.
Jen Mueller, you got to go, and I know, but I would love for you, first of all, talksportytome.com. Yep. Go there, get all of her information, book her for a keynote, or she also does coaching. Yep. If you would like to be coached by her either individually or as a team, you can do that as well. And I wanted to make sure that I allowed 1 minute for you. Michelle is 26 years old. She's a new broadcaster. She's been doing this just about a year. I want to know, because you're a seasoned vet, do you have any advice for her as she begins her career?
Well, it depends on which part of advice we are talking about. Here's the 2 pieces of advice that I give most often. It is not about the number of people that you know. We misunderstand the idea of networking. It's great to go and to have informational interviews with folks. That's probably not how you're going to get a job. The way that you are going to get a job and get an opportunity is to pick the space that you want to be seen in, whether that is the entry-level job to get your foot in the door, whether it's being with the same networking group. So there's WISE, Women in Sports and Entertainment. They have a networking group. It's being seen in a space to the point where people don't remember that space without you, right? Because that's where you're going to get people who can vouch for not only your work, but how you show up to do that work. Are you positive? Are you energetic? Can you handle the grind? How do you handle disappointment and conflict? Like being around those people all the time, that's where your true opportunity is going to come from, because they're going to be able to vouch for you. The second thing is, if you were on my side of things where you were asking questions, and I touched on this a couple of times, ask specific and direct questions. There should only be one answer to your question. I don't care what that answer is, but it's the difference in asking what happened in the 7th inning versus what gave you the confidence to steal second with 2 outs and a righty in the box. There's only one answer to that question. When you get, and I know people will say, yeah, but we have to ask open-ended questions. No, you don't. Once you make that question easy and obvious, you will be shocked at how much more comfortable and confident people become at answering your questions, which is the whole crux of telling people stories, doing interviews, and being in the business.
That is perfect advice. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
And Jen Mueller has been our guest, and go to Talk Sporty to me and .com
or find me on the socials. Yep.
Yeah, well, you've got to be everywhere, and you've got a business, and the business started and it in 2009, and it's growing great, and you've done great things, and enjoy the Seahawks today.
Thank you.
And who's going to be the starting quarterback?
Oh, it's going to be Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's the starting quarterback.
Yeah, and that's what I figured too. But in any event, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add before you go?
I don't think so. If you're into cooking, check out I Cook You Measure. It's got its own YouTube channel as well. I cook with athletes. It's really fun. Some of these guys know what they're doing. Some of them, I feel like I'm doing a public service by teaching them how to use a knife. So lots of entertainment. It's got Mariners players, Seahawks players, a few former NBA folks on there. So yeah, that's a fun one.
And Brachelle, just so you know, she's 5'1" and 115 pounds soaking wet. And Jen interviewed 6'7", 320 or so pound man. You would be like you go up to his belt buckle or something.
Yeah, I almost need a step stool sometimes. Yeah. It's embarrassing.
That reminds me of having a sore neck. But
yes,
thank you for allowing me to come in last minute, Jen. You are absolutely amazing. The things that you're doing and how you're highlighting these players as individuals, but also for everything that they're capable of. And it's very inspiring. And I'm so thankful to be here with you. And someday, I promise, I'm going to run into you at one of those events, and hopefully we'll take a picture together. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing, and continue on. It's literally such a beautiful thing to look at. I just Googled you and I'm like, wow, I love her.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Jen Mueller. And again, go to our website, talksportytome.com. And Jen, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got.